You're not responsible. It was wrong. Reach out to me. We'll connect you.
I will never see, speak, or hear from Aaron Smith-Levin for the rest of my life.
I've been raised since the age of 4 to follow orders, do as I was told, or risk losing everything.
If we speak out, that's the only way they're going to get the strength to have the courage to do the same.
Why the hell does someone have to escape to get out of a religion?
I'm still shocked by the evil. This is pure evil at work.
Okay, welcome to Come Get Some Extra, another episode. Where we left off last week was with Penny, and I can't say her last name very well, and I get kind of screwed up right around the X. I just call her Penny X for, I don't know, randomness. But when we left off with Penny, she was with her husband Brian being recruited, or they're trying to recruit her, and they hadn't quite hit that button yet to really irk her enough to say that they went too far on the hard sell, but we're about to find out just how far they would go to try to recruit her, and then we'll find out more about Brian's deteriorating condition that led to his passing, which actually was May 26th, 1 year ago, so tomorrow will be the year anniversary of that, which Penny writes about in her blog, Scientologywidow.wordpress.com. And this is one of those things that really bothered me. Of course, the abuses, the various different kinds of abuses, are some of one of the biggest things, that bother me about this whole thing. Of course, there's the disconnection, but this is one thing. This particular situation with Penny, especially because of in her case. The collateral damage, I don't think gets enough attention or gets talked enough about when talking about the abuses in Scientology. There's a lot of collateral damage of people who never had anything to do or wanted anything to do with Scientology, and it's unbelievable how bad it can be. You can think of any wise employee that didn't want to practice Scientology practices that may have been punished in some way at their job. You can think Aaron Smith-Levin's children who weren't able to have a good relationship with their grandparents, who were then forced to move away because they were living too close. Or you can think of Christy Gordon's grandfather, who wanted nothing to do with Scientology, but spent his last days being forced to do Scientology practices, thus really creating a bad quality of life in his last days. And then there's the story like Penny's here, where her husband passed, and if treated properly, and if not for the practice of Scientology, didn't have to happen. And I think that's kind of a big deal, and my heart goes out to Penny as she closes in on a year from Brian's passing. But let's go ahead and pick up where we left off here in part 2 with Penny here. She's being, they're trying to recruit her, and that's where we left off. Here we go.
Brian was just sitting there beaming. He didn't really say anything. And then somehow it came out that I had kids. And so she leapt out of her chair and said, "I have something you must have." And she dashed around the corner and then came back with this book on parenting. And she said, "This is a course that we offered, and you really must take this course if you have children." And so as she's talking, I'm paging through this book, and it's larger than average type, and it's got these big blocks of shaded text, and there's nothing in there that I didn't know. I'm trying to think, my oldest at that time was, I don't even know, 30, in her 20s, close to 30, whatever. And so I'm paging through this stuff, and I'm thinking there's nothing in here that I didn't know more than 20 years ago. Plus, I could have written this book and have written it better. And so she's saying that if I don't take this course, there is no way I am doing a great disservice to my children, because there's no way that I can give them what they need to be productive, healthy, happy adults. Now, you want to talk about reactive? Now I'm pissed.
Only Scientology.
Seriously pissed. right? And so I close the book very gently and I say, that's really, really lovely. When do you have this course? And she said, well, it's like every night from whatever to wherever. I'm like, well, no, I have teenagers at home, so I can't do that. And she said, well, we offer it all day, both days of the weekend as well. And I said, well, that seems really convenient. I'm sure that Brian could hook me up here if I decided I could make that work. And then a little bit of talk, and I look at my watch or my phone or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I think that we need to go.
Yeah.
So Brian's like, his exuberant Brian self, saying goodbye to everybody, shouting out greetings, as I'm making a beeline for the door to get out of that place. And I'm so furious. I can't speak. And I drove there, in my car, and all I wanted to do was leave him on the side of the road and say, that's it. It's bad enough that this woman insulted me, but you sat there grinning at her the whole time. And I said nothing. I just fumed and dropped him off and went home. And it took a while before I could say something to him about it. And what I said was, that was really offensive, and that will never happen again, ever. Or, this will not happen again. We'll be done. And it really didn't. Chris Shelton made a few attempts to convince me I should be on course. And people would say that when I went into the org, oh, are we going to see you on course soon? And I'd be like, no, I don't really think so. I'm pretty happy with my religion. But other than that, there was no real hard sell.
That was a pretty hard sell right there, though. Wow.
That was awful. Really awful.
And the imagery of her getting up and shooting across the room to get the book is so important to show it to you. The visual is hilarious, but I totally can see imagine what you're saying. That exuberant need, you have to have this.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Finally something, because you have children. We have the answer.
That was the end. That was it.
That was the end. And
but it wasn't.
Funny, no one ever suggested that I do a personality test.
Weird.
The doctor's wife, the doctor that I work with, his wife was on staff. And she wanted me to come in and do a free Dianetics auditing session. And I said, sure, I'll do that. But we could never agree on a time that would work because I was working for her husband too late into the evening. So I never did it. And she didn't, she offered, but she didn't really push all that far.
All right, so a couple things. I think the next thing we need to get into is the worsening condition of your husband's health. But before we get into that, I find it interesting. I feel like you dealt with Chris Shelton. Now, Chris Shelton, I consider a friend. I think he's one of the good guys. I've had him on the show a couple times. But you described, and even Chris Shelton talked about it a little bit, is that you've known Chris Shelton both ways. The way he was doing everything he could to sell services for the greater good, and the critical thinking anti-Scientology Chris Shelton. Right. So
I didn't know him super well when he was in. Brian did. He was working with Brian on some things at the org. I met him probably 2 or 3 times when he was in, and I thought he was, nice enough. But
when you're being and when you find yourself in a position where you're trying to deal with and balance having a husband, so when you're dealing with being the wife of a husband who you very much want to have relations with, but you're having this conflict, this crisis of he's involved in this destructive cult that's not doing him any good, and you got someone like Chris Shelton who has basically, just because it was his job or because he believed that was right for the greater good, pushed those services. When he comes back around on the other side as an ex-Scientologist offering help, is there trepidation there? Did it take some time? Was it hard for you to trust him at that point?
Well, I saw his posts on the ex-Scientologist message board, when he came out, and then the first video he made, I think, or one of the first videos he made, I'm not a Scientologist and here's why. And I have to say, when I looked at that video the first time, I almost fell off my chair. I was so shocked. I'm like, oh my God, this is the guy from Twin Cities. So I messaged him, I watched the whole video and I thought about it for a couple of days, and I messaged him and I said, hey, we know each other. And I don't know if you watched my interview with him on his Sensibly Speaking podcast, but it was funny because we agreed that we would meet for lunch, I think, and I talked about how I got there early. I watched him drive up. I watched him get out of his car. I made sure he wasn't with somebody or meeting somebody secretly, didn't have any recording equipment. And I had told him I was dating somebody at the local org, but I wouldn't tell him who. And it was like we sat and talked for a couple hours, and it was over an hour into the conversation that he said to me, okay, who are you dating? and I told him. But even that was a little scary to tell him.
Right.
But he told me that he had the same concerns about me, that like he had just got out and here's this woman reaching out to him. So it's kind of funny. But after that first conversation, I didn't have any trouble trusting him after that. I mean, if he was going to out me to the org and say, hey, this woman that Brian is dating is reaching out to people, I think it would have been pretty quick that it would have come back to me.
Right, and he has a way of presenting himself in a way that what his intention is, and it's a good thing, a good quality to have. But I mean,
right.
I think there's also the aspect of what I was wondering about was he had tried really hard to keep your husband on course, and I don't know if everybody can forget that. You know what I mean? But that didn't concern you any.
Well, so I didn't realize. I thought that Scientology was interfering in my life in terms of time and money to a small extent, more about time, about money, and about being able to discuss things philosophically. I did not realize until Brian was sick, and maybe even until after he died, that it influenced his life on every level and therefore mine as well. And so that depth of control about what you think about and what you believe and the lens through which you view things, I think I'm still sorting out how deep that went.
Right.
So I was, up until the week that they told him he was no longer welcome on course, we sat down with our calendars every weekend and planned out our week. And often I was the one to say, when are you going to the org this week? So the fact that Chris got him kind of back on course, and that was probably before Brian and I met. I guess I don't really have any, there's no bad feelings there for me. If it wasn't Chris, it would have been someone else. Chris didn't make Brian a true believer. Brian was that probably from the first day that he entered the org. And that's really, that's the depth of the mind control. It was not that he was on course once a week. It was all of the other things that were part of the package that had nothing to do with Chris. And there's never been one thought of ill will on my part. And in fact, when Chris said something in that video about how he felt regret for having got Ryan back in, I was actually surprised to hear that because it never even crossed my mind that would be something that he would feel some sadness around.
Doesn't that say a lot about his character too? I mean, that he's more concerned about that than you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's been an incredible and supportive friend through all of this. There's so much that I wouldn't know or wouldn't have been able to do without his help. Absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, I think, of course, to a greater degree, you might render people who were ex-Scientologists who were in some kind of authoritative power that had the ability to convert or recruit, said whatever needed to be said. You find out they weren't themselves. They weren't themselves. They were with Scientology created. All right.
Right. Which is very hard for me now to sort out who really was Brian. Maybe I don't know. Maybe all I'll ever know is what Scientology created.
Well, I mean, he stayed with you, and he didn't have to. And he was pressured not to, right?
Well, he didn't have to, but I paid for his medical care. So, I told him, you're welcome to leave. Well, I take that back. At first I said, you're welcome to leave. You can't have Scientology and me anymore because they've attacked me and they've attacked our marriage. And, that's just the boundary that I have. But if you want to leave, if you think someone else will take care of you the way that I'm taking care of you, I'll still pay for your care. But as things got progressively worse and he got sicker and there were a whole lot of dynamics in there, I said, that's not really the case anymore.
Okay.
So to a certain extent, I think he made a choice to take care of himself. But before he knew how sick he was, he did choose to stay. I don't know. I think I don't have a good way of answering that. I really think that if he hadn't gotten any sicker, if he had started to get well sooner, I think he might have been pulled back into the church. I think he might have left, but I don't know.
It feels like, and it's hard for me to say because I wasn't in your relationship and I didn't know him, but from your story, it feels like he was very torn.
Oh, absolutely. And that contributed to, the depression that eventually led to the catatonia that eventually led to his death. Absolutely. He was very torn. I don't think he wanted to leave. And I don't think he wanted to not be a Scientologist. But, when they kick you out, you don't really have an option. And because he was very ill, there was no hope of getting on the bridge anyway.
Now, why did they kicked him off? Because he was getting worse health-wise?
No, they kicked him out because I'm evil.
It was because of you.
Right.
Oh, wow.
They kicked him out because of me, because I was Facebook friends with Chris Shelton.
That's right. Oh my gosh, that was the whole reason. Had you?
That was that was the crux of the reason. Yes, I was Facebook friends, and we knew kind of that was coming down the pike, and we'd had a conversation about it earlier. That I, again, was an enemy of the church because I was Facebook friends with Chris Shelton. And I said, your church doesn't get to censor my friends. There are people on my Facebook page who are far left liberals, far right conservatives, Muslim, Jew, pagans, Christians, Scientologists. There are people on my Facebook page who don't like my religion, okay? So your church doesn't get to tell me that this one person who is talking out against Scientology doesn't get to be on my Facebook friends. It just doesn't work that way. And then then, I talked about the creed of Scientology, that every person has the right to write about, speak about, whatever their opinions. Like their attempt to censor me is contrary to your own creed. It's contrary to their Declaration of Human Rights that they say is in line with the UN's Declaration of Human Rights. It's not going to happen. And he agreed. He was like, no, I agree. And, if they do that, I said, what if they kick you out? He said, well, I'll just do my studies at home and it'll be fine. But when push actually came to shove, it wasn't fine.
Was it only friending Chris Shelton on Facebook, or were you making comments about Scientology?
No, in fact, at that point, so that was like the fall of 2015. At that point, I didn't know that there were Scientology or ex/critic Scientology groups on Facebook. I had no idea. I never read Chris's stuff on Facebook. I watched his videos and went to his blog, but I never saw him on Facebook. I never made, in 2015, I was probably making some health statements on Facebook because my mom had been really ill and had died at that point. But up until the day that my mom got sick, my Facebook was entirely cat videos and inspirational memes.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing controversial on there ever.
Right.
That's not the case now. Now it's only controversy.
Yeah, right. 100%.
I mean, pretty much. So no.
I think I've seen a cat and dog. I've seen a cat and dog video.
Yes, that's about it. And in fact, they said to him, your wife liked 6 things on Chris Shelton's page. And I'm like, 6 things over what period of time? I'm like, I like 6 things that you post in an hour. What? Oh my gosh. And none of it was about Scientology. Yeah, they had them numbered. Apparently they had shown him, that I was friends with this evil person. So there were some other things kind of going on behind the scenes at that time. And I'm saving some of that for the book. So I'll just tell you there is a little bit bigger picture, but you'll have to wait until my book comes out.
Understandable.
Okay. But really the big fiery thing was that I was Facebook friends with Shelton, particularly because he had been in Twin Cities, and that, as you know, was a big deal because he left the Sea Org, and that reflects badly, blah, blah, blah. Yes.
Do you feel that's bigoted of Scientology to treat people that way? Because I feel like that's bigotry in itself, because they're always crying bigotry. Well,
they cry bigotry when what they mean is you disagree with me.
Right.
Just because I disagree with someone or something doesn't mean, A, that I'm attacking it, or B, that I'm bigoted. I think where you can make an argument for bigotry is their personal attacks against people who speak out, where they get former friends or family members to tell half-truths in videos, where they make hate pages that are untruthful or skewed or flat-out lies. Those are the kinds of things that I think get into attacks of bigotry. But if they disagree with someone speaking out, okay, say you disagree. And if you disagree, this is what I talk about in critical thinking, is if you disagree with my argument on anything, if it's religion or gender politics or education or healthcare, then go do your research, go find your own research, peer-reviewed research papers, and come back and present me with facts that oppose what I'm saying and that present your point of view. That's a rational disagreement. But to start calling somebody names, or which including bigot, because they disagree with you is well, it's an error in reasoning.
Just discrediting. I had someone ask me the other day. You hear this a lot from people who are in Scientology. I heard this from somebody who's one of those in-between people who are out of Scientology, but they're still believe in it, that hit me with the question of, when's the last time you talked to a Scientologist? And I said, when's the last time you talked to a mime? Because it's the same conversation. I've invited, since I've started this podcast, I've invited actual active Scientologists to be part of the podcast from the beginning. Leah Remini in the Aftermath has invited Scientologists to be on the show from the beginning. They don't have an argument. It's not that we don't talk to them or try to understand their side. They don't present a side.
Right. Well, and remember, they can't present a side because there's that prescription against verbal tech. So they can't explain to you verbally what they believe. What they have to do is get the reference source or tell you to come down to the org and take a class.
I do get that a lot, yep. Why don't you go check out the local org? I did. It was locked. The lights were out. No one was there.
Oops.
No, it's funny. This is the God's honest truth, and I haven't actually talked about it on this show. The Orlando org, that's the address that was listed on the website last year, had opened the grand opening, I want to say like late 2015, early 2016. I have a screenshot of the grand opening. I went last year in 2017 when they were advertising walk-ins welcome. I went there during business hours. It was locked. The lights are out. There was no one around. I had been talking about this all year long. Now all of a sudden, someone messaged me a few months ago, back around Christmas, and said, "Oh, that hasn't opened yet. We haven't had their opening yet." And I showed them the grand opening, and they didn't really have a good answer. And now they closed it, and now they're going to open another one. I don't know if it has anything to do with me outing them, or if it's just an excuse, but the whole thing's full of inconsistencies and twisted truth. It's hilarious.
Right, and just to take a small example, like the purist, they'll tell you what L. Ron Hubbard said the purist is supposed to do, but when you counter with science, with good science, they don't have anything to fall back on. Like go get science, have someone in medicine or physiology or exercise or whatever review what you're doing, but they don't have that. I mean, it's as much as they say it's an applied religious philosophy and not a faith, it really is faith-based. You are believing what L. Ron Hubbard said 100% and countering back with fact. They have nowhere to go from that because they can't go find research, what you and I would call research, right, to back up what they believe because it doesn't exist.
Well, that's the materials they send you. They go, okay, here's a link to the information of my argument so you can see the proof. And it's an LRH document. It's just something from Dianetics or something,
Right.
Okay.
Well, and I don't know if you read on my blog, I did a series on the TRs, on the training routines, and on the effects, and on the dissociative effect that happens, and on how I believe that for some people, perhaps a lot of people, it almost borders on torture. But I got a lot of pushback from the same community, the people who aren't in the church but who are still practicing, that it's not dissociative, that it's not trance-like, that it doesn't do these things, and there's no research. Well, actually, there is research. There's research on fixed eye staring and on the trance that it induces. There's research on the closed eye sensory deprivation, on the trance and hallucination that it induces. So there's research on the side of science on a lot of these Scientology processes and techniques that suggest that they're either harmful or don't work. But on the Scientology side, no one has done the research to say that it's not harmful or it is beneficial or that it does work. And so they don't have anything to counter with because they can't actually do that research. They have no mechanism for actually doing the research. Their only mechanism is believing what L. Ron Hubbard said. Like you say, the research paper they send you is something that L. Ron Hubbard wrote.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, a lot of it's placebo effect. If you pull out your fingernails and the next day you have a good day, then pulling out your fingernails must work.
Right.
You know, that's the research.
Right.
So getting back to so what your book's going to be about, and what a lot of your research is, and a lot of your efforts online to educate people about the abuses of Scientology, is that you hold Scientology responsible for your husband's death. You feel it was preventable, and it was the practice of Scientology that led to him not making it, basically. So what happened? There was more than just the cancer.
Right. So it is true that Brian's cancer became aggressive. And we began treating that in the spring of 2016 and slowly saw improvement over time. So his tumor shrank considerably, all of his labs stabled, his need for supportive measures decreased. But this bizarre symptom that we saw that we didn't even know what to call it. We would call it confusion, but it wasn't like he was confused. It's not like when you see people who are confused. He was dissociative to a certain extent, but that's kind of what we focused on. But even that was strange because he would come and go in an instant. He would be sitting and having a conversation, and then his eyes would start to roll back and forth, side to side, and then he'd just droop and be gone. And in fact, we had a medical provider catch that on video, and she was shocked because I told people this would happen, and apparently I'm not believable because they would just like poo-poo me, and then this medical provider caught it on video, and the look on her face, she just stared at him, and then she looked at me, and she looked back at him, and I just kind of shrugged and nodded and said, yes, this is exactly what I've been telling you. And we couldn't get an answer for that. And for the longest time after he died, I would go around and around in my head about I should have tried to get him psychiatric help. Well, I did try, and we all tiptoed around him seeing a psychiatrist, myself included, out of respect for his Scientology beliefs. I should have demanded a full psychiatric evaluation when he was in the hospital. Well, I did that. I couldn't get one. No one ever did a full psychiatric evaluation. I should have taken him to therapy. I took him to 2 or 3. No, I took him to 4 therapists, and no one caught it. One woman wanted to spend our time together helping me understand how he wanted to die because he didn't have Scientology in his life anymore. One woman couldn't talk to him because he would disappear like that. The other one specialized in dissociation and did some good work at first, and then he had a very severe setback. It wasn't that I didn't try it. And then we did neuropsych evaluations. Somebody said maybe it's dementia. Well, dementia this was sudden onset. I can tell you the day and the time that my husband disappeared.
Wow.
Dementia doesn't happen like that. It's slow onset over time, and this is not. But we did neuropsych eval, and they didn't catch it because everybody wanted to put things into the cancer box. No matter what he had going on, they decided it was due to the cancer, in spite of the fact that all of his cancer symptoms, the things that we were tracking, were improving. So then I finally got him to see like a personal psychiatrist, not one that you see just when you're in the hospital. I got him in to see his own personal psychiatrist. And I said to this doctor, I said, this looks to me like catatonia. And he said, oh, And he did a few tests, and he said, well, I don't see anything today that looks like catatonia, and that's really rare. So he kind of blew me off. I didn't know it was really rare. I had a brother-in-law who was catatonic many years ago. So then these bizarre symptoms would continue, the spacing out, the sitting in strange postures, or the inability to hold a posture. He'd be sitting up on a chair, and he'd keep sliding over to one side, drooping. And I'd say, Brian, what are you doing? And he'd say, I don't know. I don't know. His gait became very strange. He started to do like this funny walk on the balls of his feet, kind of duck walk thing, and he couldn't figure out how to stand up straight. And he was in the hospital, and then he went to a transitional care unit to do some physical therapy before he came home. And he got better there briefly and then got worse, I think in part because the care was substandard, and I think that some things were said to him that made him lose hope. That's what I think, but I don't know. And I took him in. He was going in for a medication reevaluation with the psychiatrist. And I said, I really, really think he looks like catatonia. And the psychiatrist said, well, let's do this. And he took out this form, this check sheet, and he started filling it in. And then he looked up at me and he said, wow. He said, he definitely scores for catatonia on this sheet. And he said, if I were you, I would take him into the emergency room today. And I said, here's the thing. Every time I take him into the emergency room and I ask for mental health services, they tell me he's got a urinary tract infection, his calcium's too high, his hemoglobin's too low. And we address those things in very short order, but this never gets better. No one ever addresses this. And frankly, they're often quite rude to me. When I took him in and said, some of what you're seeing is the dissociation, I had a medical provider say to me, oh, what is a dissociative disorder anyway? I mean, very rude and dismissive. And it's not, I'm a well-educated adult. It's not like I was reading things in a woman's magazine and coming in and saying, hey, I read this thing in Good Housekeeping or Women's Day. Like I read research papers. I know what I'm talking about. And he said, so the psychiatrist said, I'll write a note for you to take with you. I want you to go to this particular hospital because they have a separate mental health track in their ER. I want you to ask for that. And this is the psychiatrist I want you to ask for. There's a geriatric psychiatrist. She's the best in the state, if not in the region. She's really good at what she does, and I want you to ask. So we came home, and the psychiatrist had adjusted Brian's medication a little bit. He said he might become even less responsive. And I laughed. I said he can't be less responsive. Well, I was wrong. I took him home overnight. He started on this new medication regime. He became completely, not like passed out, non-responsive, but like sitting up with his head down, floppy, couldn't move. I mean, couldn't move him anywhere. There was nothing. And so I called the ambulance again, and I said, I have a letter from Brian's psychiatrist. He said to ask for the mental health track. We've changed his medication. He wants him to see this particular psychiatrist at this hospital. Can we do that? And they said, oh, yes. And so they radioed ahead. They took us into the mental health unit in the ER, which, by the way, is very different than the medical unit. You go into a locked ward where the TVs are behind screens. It was really an experience.
Right.
And then they took his vitals. And because his temperature was very slightly elevated, they decided that he had sepsis, that he had a systemic infection, and so they kicked him out of the mental health unit and over into the medical. And I kept saying, wait. Vitals out of parameter are a key indicator of catatonia. And they were like, nope, he's septic. And I'm like, nope, pretty sure he's not. And they cultured his blood, and of course nothing grew. They put him in ICU, and I begged them to see the psychiatrist that we had been referred to, and they wouldn't let Brian see her. They didn't call her down to the ICU. We saw a different psychiatrist who was rude and dismissive, and the hospitalist, I guess, who was an internist. The hospitalist who was rude and dismissive, and I begged them. I said, you have a chance to save this man's life. Don't you want to take this chance? I understand that we don't fit the normal conventional parameters for anything. I get that. But you have a chance to do something that might save a life. Don't you want to do that? And they wouldn't. And in fact, when the internist, the hospitalist doctor came in and threw a graph down in front of me, and he said, look at this. Brian's PSA, the thing that we measure to see prostate health, has just been climbing since this date. So it's clear that he's dying of prostate cancer. And I said, yes, it's been climbing since that date. But if you look at the graph, if you look at the full graph, you're only showing me half of it. It was very high before. It came down to that low number that you're starting with, and then it climbed again. If you look in his chart at the letter and the notes from his oncologist, he states that Brian's PSA is very high, but it's stable at a very high level, and that he can't explain it, but that we should not pin everything on cancer and look at the big picture. And I said, the symptoms that we're seeing today, I was seeing before Brian had some of these cancer marker things. He said, well, that's just your opinion. I said, no, it's not. I said, I have ER visits, concurrent with MRIs and blood work. Those are facts. And then he yelled at me, I don't have to listen to your facts. I said, that was when I started saying standard of care, and I'm calling my lawyer on Monday. But we still didn't see the psychiatrist for 2 or 3 more days. I saw the psychiatrist that I wanted to see finally came down after I made a huge stink, came down to see me the following Monday, which was the day that Brian died the first time. And she said, what is it that you would like me to know? She was very kind. They gave me all new doctors who were very kind. And I said, here are the symptoms that I've seen: the spacing out, the strange posturing, the standing in a strange posture for 40 minutes, the bizarre gait, the not moving, the inability to swallow, all of these things that come and go. They're not constant. They come and go. And she stopped me and she said, absolutely. She said, this thing that you've been seeing for a year or more is absolutely catatonia. She said, it's so severe that if I had seen Brian in my office a month ago or 6 months ago or a year ago when he was stronger, I could have forced him by court order to get treatment in spite of his religious beliefs. That's how sick he is. So catatonia, if you don't know what it is a psychomotor disease that is believed to run concurrent with either a physical or another mental illness. Most often you hear about schizophrenic catatonia.
Okay.
It also occurs with depression, but it also occurs with medical disorders. And it's considered to be rare, but newer research is suggesting that it's not as rare as we think it is. And it's life-threatening because people stop eating. They stop moving. They stop eating. They don't, basically they end up starving because they don't have good nutrition. Right. And what happened to Brian is that he became so weak that he lost his airway, and they revived him, and then he never woke up. He was on life support for 4 more days, and then when we removed the life support, then he died within minutes, almost immediately. So Brian had a psychiatric history before entering Scientology. He had a history of severe depression and of dissociation, and he received electroshock therapy in the 60s. So he was an illegal pre-clear. That's why he was never able to get on the bridge. Okay. He received ECT in the 60s, and then he had 10 years of care under a psychiatrist and different psychiatric medication. And then he stopped all of that cold turkey when he joined Scientology in 1977 and had no mental health care. And everyone that knew him through those years that I have spoken with has said that if he had had good mental health care through those years, he would never have ended up in this place in 2015. Or if he had ended up depressed and going down the road towards Catatonia in 2015 because of his other health issues, he would have received good mental health care sooner. Yeah. So, you know, as Chris and I talked about, it is a multi-system failure. Certainly the medical establishment failed him, and failed him severely. But he wouldn't have been in that place if it hadn't been for his years in Scientology. He wouldn't have ended up with a severe psychiatric disorder.
Well, that sounds like a terrible, terrible experience, and I'm sorry it happened that way. And I do think some people will listen to your story and think, well, how does Scientology kill your husband? The medical field failed him. But you just said it, you know, things would have been different if he wasn't in a organization that tries to claim they have all the answers in places they have no business saying they have the answers.
Right. And the really cruel thing about being an illegal pre-clear is that Scientology says we have all the answers. We have the only way, the only technology, the only way to regain your godlike abilities. We have the only way to repair your life and restore you to this great being that you should be. But you, Brian, are so damaged by having been under the care of a psychiatrist before you knew about us that you are not good enough to receive all these great things that we have. But you can't leave us either.
Think about that. People listening, that here's this guy who is being told he's so damaged, he's not able enough, because that's the flawed doctrine of Scientology. Only abled body being more able. He wasn't able enough to go on the bridge, but he was able enough to give them his money.
Yes, exactly. And he did. He did.
That's crazy. That is pure insanity. And I think you told me because he was never able to go on the bridge and because he had to leave Scientology, you felt like he kind of mentally checked out because of that.
Oh, yeah. He, when he got sick, before we knew everything that was going on, he sat in a chair and didn't move, basically. And I said to him, Brian, you have to eat, and you have to get up, and you have to move. Like, you can't just sit here in this chair and die because you're not on course, or because you're not at the local org. And he looked at me and he said, I don't have anything left to live for.
Wow. This is Scientology.
This is Scientology. Exactly.
So I want people to realize, and I think people do a little bit, but I do feel like, I know you wanted to talk about a little bit, that the never-ends that are affected. And I'm not saying that I'm sensitive to this because I'm a never-end. That's not what I think about. I think about the people who are affected as collateral damage. The grandchildren, the brother, the sister, the mother, the father, who never had anything or wanted anything to do with Scientology, that get terribly affected by Scientology practices. And this is a very major example of that. Is your life was turned upside down. It was kind of like, without being imprisoned by the cult of Scientology mentality, you're imprisoned by the situation. You were stuck in a situation where you couldn't be fully honest and communicate with your own spouse because it would shake the foundation of your marriage, basically.
Right. There were things that we couldn't talk about. And our agreement, when we first started dating and it was serious, is that we would share who we were, that we wouldn't hide who we were. And yet I couldn't share who I was in that area. And not to say, like, I think you need to get out of this thing, or it's a cult, or it's evil, but just to even be able to say, I have concerns, or I don't know that I really buy this thing that I heard at the event. Let's check it out.
Right.
Which I would say about, which I do say about things in paganism all the time. I'm like, I'm not really buying that. Do you have a resource on that? Right. I mean, you can't say that. But the damage, I think is certainly what happened to Brian and what happened to us, and it's that's multi-level of complexity. I quit a good job to take care of him. I spent a lot of money on his medical care. I lost friends. A lot of things happened. What happened to me and Brian is an extreme example. But even when you think about grandparents who lose their grandchildren to the Sea Org and don't see them again, or friends who lose their friends because they've entered Scientology and now they are encouraged to pull away from people who aren't Scientologists. The collateral damage, I think there's a web of that underlying Scientology's high control that is somewhat invisible.
Yeah. Yeah, you still there?
Yeah, I am.
I felt like you cut out. Okay, that was me again. So I have to watch my edits and get some of those blank spaces out. So
yeah.
No, I think you're right, and how much can we talk about it? I mean, it is what it is. But the collateral damage needs to not be ignored because it's worse than, just like it's the saying, right? It's worse than you think. It's always worse than you think.
Scientology always worse than you think. That's for sure. And you look at my life and Brian's, and you can see the collateral damage as it implodes in my home. But what you don't see are our circle of friends who were never in Scientology, never heard of Scientology, know a little bit about it now because my Facebook page is now very controversial, but who have also lost a very, very dear friend. Brian is as much gone from their lives as he is from mine. And their connection to Scientology is very tangential. I look at my little grandchildren that he was here when they were born, and he loved those babies. And they'll never see him grow up, or he'll never see them grow up. I just,
right. I know what you mean.
Right. And that kind of damage that we don't see, or the camping events that we went to every year for years. Last year we had a memorial service for Brian. These are people who don't know anything about Scientology except a tiny little bit that I forced them to hear when I'm ranting.
Right.
And yet they lost someone who was very dear in their lives. And I think there's a web of damage that just ripples out so far that we can't even find where it ends.
That's fair. It's fair to say. I agree. So you would say with 100% confidence you think he would be here today if he was allowed to have the proper care from the start?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you can't predict what any kind of illness is going to do, but I would say he'd have about a 90% chance of still being here. Absolutely.
All right. So that's an important message right there. Do you know how far out we are from a book release?
No. So I would say it's about 80% first draft written. I'm going to send it to beta readers. I was really hoping to do that this spring, but I had to take a break. I had a lot of trauma around his illness and just needed to take a break for my own mental health. So I have now started writing again excitedly. So I'm assuming it's going to go to beta readers by the end of the summer, early part of the fall, and then rewrite. I'm still hoping 2019. I'm going to. I'm hoping for conventional publishing. I'll start querying agents as soon as I have that first or second draft edits done.
Well, I look forward to it. I think it's going to be an important book, and I think you're doing important stuff speaking out, because you could have easily just faded into the shadows, moved on with your life, but you chosen to fight for the lives of others, and I think that's admirable.
Thank you. It's not always easy.
It can't be. So we're going to do here, if you're cool with it, we're going to do 10 questions. And then at the end, you'll get a chance to give some final thoughts, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
All right. So 10 questions with Penny. Yes.
I love it.
Penny X. Question number 1. True or false? There is no life without some kind of spirituality.
Wow, it's a true or false and not an essay? I'm going to say true.
It's hard not to essay that one, isn't it? So much to it. Number 2, toast or bagel?
Bagel. Crispy.
Okay. Crispy bagel. All right. Number 3, this is a complete the sentence. The key to early mental health care is...
The key to early mental health care is I want to say vigilance, but I feel like there should be a word that goes with vigilance. Maybe rational vigilance.
Okay. Just maybe an overall awareness, right?
Right. Be aware of symptoms and be proactive about seeking help sooner rather than later.
All right. Number 4, Twitter or Facebook?
Oh, man. Yes. I am a social media junkie.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, you're all over the place, but in a good way.
Thank you.
Okay. So both.
Yes.
Twitter can be a mess sometimes, but okay. Number 5. Recommend 3 good books if you can.
Wow, 3 good books. Well, outside, so I'm going to recommend a category of all of the people who have come out of Scientology and told their stories or written information about Scientology. So any of that you must read. Right, so many. I mean, you can't even pick 3. Plus, like if you pick one, your other friends aren't going to be happy. So any of them, they're all amazing. I'm going to be diplomatic and keep my friends here. Let's see, David Baldacci's Absolute Power. I think it was his first novel. I loved it.
Okay.
I hated the movie. Mary Stewart's Crystal Cave trilogy, and the Dalai Lama's Ethics for the New Millennium.
Sounds interesting. That's an interesting group of 3 books right there. I like the diversity. All right.
I'm very thankful.
Number 6, true or false? Scientology is a religion.
That has to be an essay. Scientology, I think that practitioners have a right to call anything they want a religion. If I decide tomorrow that I'm going to worship my cat and that's going to be my religion, I think that I have the personal freedom to call whatever I want my religion. Scientology itself, does it behave like a religion, a charitable organization? No, it doesn't. No, it uses the idea of religion as a way to protect themselves from the consequences of toxic abuse and their business model.
So I think you're saying false?
Wait, what?
I think you're saying false?
Yeah, I'm saying Scientology can't call itself a religion, but practitioners can say that's their religion.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't follow the rules very well. You know that, right?
Maybe I'll change it. True or false? Scientology is a cult.
Yes.
True.
Scientology is a high control group. Yes. Destructive, toxic, abusive cult. Yes.
You just completely blew up number 7, though. Completely blew up number 7. True or false? Wicca is a religion.
I suppose. I don't know.
You kind of said it wasn't earlier.
It is. It doesn't use religious cloaking as a way to avoid tax obligations or to abuse people.
Okay, that's fair. Number 8. Drink alone, drink with friends, or just drink water because it's necessary to live.
Yes, all of the above.
Just drink.
I live in Wisconsin. You drink milk, you drink beer, you drink.
Just drink.
Right.
But responsibly, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I live
Number
in Wisconsin
9.
in the 21st century.
Number 9. Why ask why?
Oh, my gosh. Because there's so many fascinating things out there to know. Just, I can't imagine not asking why. Plus, it gets you invited to be on your kids' trivia team when you go visit.
All right, very good. And number 10's kind of open-ended. Is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to say? Any messages for the people out there?
Messages for people is to evaluate information skeptically, to learn about critical thinking, about cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, and certainly to understand what logical fallacies are. I have a little card of logical fallacies I keep on my desk, and to recognize those errors in reasoning when they pop up in arguments online, in articles, in news reports, certainly on Twitter or on blogs, and to just, use good intellectual tools for intellectual safety. Protect your belief systems by being skeptical.
Good message. All right. Well, Penny, thank you for being on the show. I think you have an important story and a major message out there, and I'm glad we were able to put it out.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was really enjoyable.
All right. Well, I'll be in touch, and you take care.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Okay, so that was Penny. Apparently, she endured quite a bit of trauma. Of course, like I said, she talked about the Catatonia. If you want to understand better what happened with Brian and what the Catatonia means and what Catatonia, they kind of like, I can't talk today. The catatonic state she referred to and the effects it has on people. I have put a link in with some information. There's other very good resources than what I linked on the subject if you want to read up on it, of course. And, of course, check out her blog, Scientologywidow.wordpress.com. Of course, remember to check out Lori Hodgson's book, A Mother's Heartbreak. That's out right now. And I don't know what's coming next week. I don't know if I have an interview, if I'm going to rant, if I'm just going to take it off. But I will let you know as the week progresses, folks. Just keep track of my Twitter account, Miami6Man, or at CTS_here. And until next time, stay connected. And that about sums it up.
You have been listening to Come Get Some Extra on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, YouTube, and many other streaming services where available. As always, stay connected. And that about sums it up.